Hey guys, welcome back. Hope all of you are doing good. This is your host Devang Sharma. आज की वीडियो में बात करने वाले हैं very important topic and a very commonly asked interview question about Java. So without a further ado, let's start the video.
Hey guys, let me introduce to a wonderful initiative taken by Newton School. This initiative is called Launchpad. This is for the people who want to start coding from scratch and learn the basics of different programming languages for absolutely free of cost. Yes, I repeat, absolutely free of cost. It has plenty of resources available here, including courses from Java, Python, Node.js, CPP, React.js, and DBMS and SQL management. Also, few of these courses are available in Hindi as well. So what are you waiting for? Applications are open now. Apply today to become a rockstar developer within 6 months.
So welcome back to Newton School Launchpad and our complete professional Java series. This is a complete Java series from a freshman to a professional developer. Irrespective of whether you're a freshman or junior developer or a senior developer, you will find something related to you that will help you excel in your career. So without a further ado, let's start today's video. In today's video, we are going to talk about very important topic and very crucial topics in Java, which is static binding and dynamic binding. We are going to understand the difference between static and dynamic binding along with the code examples and their use cases. Let's start with their definitions first. First, what is binding first of all? So connecting a method call to the method body is called as binding. Let me repeat, connecting a method call to its method body is called as binding. Now there are two types of binding. First is static binding, second is dynamic binding. Static binding is also called early binding and dynamic binding is also called late binding. Let's dig deeper into it. Here's an image that will explain the difference between static and dynamic binding. So in case of static binding, as you can see, static binding is when type of the object is determined at the compile time. That is called early binding or the static binding. And when type of the object is determined at the runtime, it is known as dynamic binding or late binding. Now all of you would be having this question, what is the type of the object? What do you mean by type of the object? Let's go and understand type of the object. Type of means and type of instance I am talking about. Let's understand the type of instances of different examples. In case of variables, in case of references, in case of objects as well. First examples, variables have a type. So each variable have a type. It may be primitive or maybe non-primitive, and this type is their data type. Take example, if I declare variable as integer data equal to 30. So here my data variable is of type int. Second example is for the references. References also have their type. Now when I say references, consider the example here. I've created a class dog and then in the main function I define dog d1. So d1 is a reference to dog t or d1 is an object of type t. So the type of d1 is what? Type of d1 is dog. Last but the most important, objects. Objects are instance of a particular Java class, but it is also an instance of superclass. Now that has to be differentiated about the type. Take an example. I have a parent class animal, then I have a child class dog, which is extending my parent class animal. In the main function, I define dog d1 equal to new dog. If you observe carefully, d1 is an instance of dog class because I define as dog d1 equal to new dog, but it is also an instance of animal. That differentiation, that allocation that will be allotted to you of its type, if it is done at the compile time, then it is called static binding. If it is done at the runtime, it is called the dynamic binding. First of all, let's understand the static binding within code. So as we know, static binding is when type of the object is determined at the compile time or by the compiler, it is known as static binding. If there's any private, final or static method in a class, there is static binding. Now this is a crucial point. Whenever you find any private, final or static method in a class, it's always going to be static binding. Let's take an example of static binding through the code. So let's go to Newton School ID and code it. As you can see, this is my Newton School ID, which has support for multiple programming languages along with custom input, custom output, as well as standard error, output and messages. Let's type a code for static binding. So I defined a class dog. So in my dog, I provide something like a private function. Whenever you see a private function, it's going to be always a compile time binding or static binding. So private type is void, then we have read. In the function, let me print a value Now in my main function, what I'm doing is I'm creating an object of dog d1 equal to new dog. So I created an object of type dog. The type of d1 is what? The type of d1 is dog here. This is what the most crucial impact in any binding case is. We have to know for the type as well. The type for d1 is dog. And then I print d1 dot eat. As soon as I say d1 dot eat, what should be my output? My output should be dog. This eat method should have been called. Let's try to understand the example. Let's run it. As you can see, the eat has the private access here. So what I have to do, I have to make it public. When I make it public and then I run it, now it should give me the output, which is dog. So how is static binding implemented here? Even before running the program, during the compile time only, I knew the type of d1 is dog only. And that is why the output is going to be dog only, nothing else. This kind of program is called static binding or compile time binding, where the type is already associated before the running or execution of the program. During the compile time, the compiler knows that the type of d1 is dog, hence the output is going to be dog. Let's understand the other type of binding. Other type of binding is dynamic binding. So dynamic binding is when the type of object is not determined at the compile time. It is determined during the runtime. Then it is called the dynamic binding or late binding. Take an example. The example that I am going to show is it will not be determined by the compiler because one of the instance of the dog will be an instance of animal also. Let's see the example and then I will come back to the screen to explain why it is not determined during the compile time. Just similar to previous example, let me make another class here which will be superclass for class dog, and let me name the superclass as animal. And in my animal class, I can use the same methods. Eat. And I can rename it to animal. And my class dog will extend animal. Now if you see carefully, if I create something like animal of a equal to new dog and I call it a.eat, what should be the output now? What should be the output now? If you can see, here object type cannot be determined by the compiler because the instance of dog is also an instance of the animal. So this needs to be executed or this needs to be checked at the runtime. This is not possible to check at the compile time. As far as this output is concerned, this output will be dog. Let's try and check it. As you can see, the output is still dog. Let me run again. Yes, it is executed, the output is still dog. Or let's change it to dog is eating or something like this to differentiate from the last example. As you can see, the output is dog is eating. Let's understand how compile time binding or dynamic binding is implemented here. As you can see in the example that I have shown you, the object type cannot be determined by the compiler because the instance of dog that you created is also the instance of the parent class. That is why compiler doesn't know its type. Compiler knows only its base type. So its actual type is determined only during the runtime. Which object is calling it? Only at that time you could be able to identify will the output be dog or will the output be animal. This example is called dynamic binding or runtime binding. That's it for today's video, guys. Let's revise the concept that we have done today. We understood the difference of static binding and dynamic binding. Static binding also called early binding, dynamic binding is also called late binding. Static binding is when the type of the object is determined at the compile time. And dynamic binding or the late binding is when the type of the object is determined at the runtime. We have seen the example what is mentioned by type. It can be reference, it can be variable, or it can be object. And at last we have seen with the code examples of static and dynamic binding. I hope you like this video. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe it, and do watch all the videos in the series in progression to have a better understanding for freshman to professional developer. Feel free to share it with your friends and comment down what is the best part that you like and what else you want me to improve. Till then, see you in the next video. Thank you.